So I was a little disappointed in Mark Kelly this morning. Now, for those of you who have been living in your parents' basement, and they didn't even have the decency to give you your own television, I hate to see this child abuse. That Mark Kelly is a senator, and he's a United States senator. His wife was shot and suffered terrible damages, so neurological damage. And but Mark Kelly is now a politician in his own right. He's from Arizona, and he is the United States senator, one of the two United States senators. And he is also a astronaut, and before that, he was a combat pilot in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So he's the real deal, and he retired as a captain in the Navy. And a captain in the Navy, for those of you who would like to know about military ranks, captain is the equivalent of a full colonel in the Air Force or the Army. So he was way up there. And how do I know? Because my father one time was a full colonel. He then retired and stayed on as a brigadier general, a civilian equivalent of brigadier general, in the number 2 line of command of the Air Force JAG. So I'm aware of what it takes to be an officer at that level. I grew up with people like that. I grew up with in the military around colonels and generals, and at the house, and my dad, and it was a constant thing. And one thing I learned about these people, these military people, is they have a huge, tremendous sense of duty and patriotism and morality, and they're particularly aware of the fact that they are involved with the use of weapons that can wreak havoc on buildings, on peoples, on structures, on infrastructure, on natural resources, on anything. An enormous power that particularly the Air Force has. And they were really sensitive to how that power was used, and they were always on the lookout for receiving illegal orders. Because often you get this, it's great that we have civilian control, but civilians who don't always understand what war is all about, and I run into people like that all the time, often don't know what horrible damage can be done by military activities and when it's totally inappropriate. But here's something you don't need to be an expert on the Code of Military Justice. And again, I was raised on the Code of Military Justice, and I was also an Air Force JAG civilian, equivalent to a major, for the Air Force. So I'm pretty familiar with the Code of Military Justice, but you don't have to be an expert on the Code of Military Justice to know this. If somebody you encounter somebody in combat, and they surrender, they're wounded, they're no longer involved in the war effort, they're helpless. For someone to go up to those people, a person like that, and shoot them in cold blood, is clearly a violation of the Code of Military Justice. It's also a violation of common decency, and it's a violation of common sense. If you think that's okay, you're not thinking straight. Everybody knows that. That was one of the terrible things about the My Lai massacre. Those are people that living in huts, women, children, and they just went through and just massacred them because they were given an order by some captain. Cali was his name. So if that didn't teach us the importance of paying attention to the orders that you're given, and the orders that you're given that are illegal are often pretty bright line, like what Cali did in My Lai. Pretty bright line with the example I gave you about prisoners of war. You don't execute prisoners of war. So what we had going on here in the water out there was the first strike. Apparently there was a boat coming in, and they bombed it without any justification. It was in international waters. It was not any kind of military threat to the United States. They blew it out of the water, and then there were 2 survivors that were hanging on to some pieces of wood left from the boat to keep them drowning, and they had a second strike to kill those 2 people. And allegedly, the reason for that was that Pete Hegseth had given this order to kill everybody. Now, he denies it. But you know who's not buying that denial? 3 prominent Republicans. 3. One of whom is the chairman of the Senate committee on the military. Forget the name. I'll look it up right now. It's so embarrassing. Yeah, it is. Yeah, Roger Wicker, a Mississippi Republican who leads the Senate Armed Services Committee, is vowing to conduct vigorous oversight following this incident in the Caribbean. He's a Republican, and he's been a solid MAGA Trump supporter all the way. And now, basically saying, you're not buying this Hegseth denial, and they're going to take a hard look at this, and they're going to have hearings about this, because what they did was either illegal in that they were acting like they were at war with these people and driving these boats who were not soldiers and a part of the Venezuelan army or any of that nature. They just suspected that they were on their way, not even bringing drugs to the United States, on their way. That does not justify you under articles of war to attack that ship. And we have been dealing with these kinds of ships forever. The Coast Guard intercepts them, or the Navy intercepts them and says, we want permission to go aboard. And if they deny that permission, and they attempt to keep our military officers from coming on board, they get machine gunned. Then it's appropriate. But it's not appropriate to blow them out of the water first and ask questions later. And we have so far seen no solid evidence that these people were carrying any drugs at all. And if they were carrying any drugs, it was probably cocaine, not fentanyl. So that's where that stands. But let's flip it for a minute. Let's assume that they weren't. That was their justification. They're saying, well, we were at war, which we were not. So it's not a legal justification. But assuming we were at war, we get back to the prisoner of war analogy. Those happened when we were at war. One of the things we hated so much about the Japanese soldiers is they would take Americans in as prisoners of war and then execute them. We never did that. So no matter what the justification is, there's no justification for killing people in cold-blooded murder, and that's what we did. Not only that, it's not only not appropriate, not only is it a violation of the law, of the Code of Military Justice, it's also it's very suspicious, because one of the advantages of boarding these ships is you're grabbing these mules who got their orders and their instructions from somebody else who got it from somebody. It leads you to your trail, just what they do when they catch somebody buying drugs for the personal use. Cops pull them in and they start asking them questions. They find, well, who sold it to you? Then they go to that person. Well, who would you get it from? And they go right up the chain of command to the top. That's exactly what is normally done when they interdict a drug, somebody bringing drugs into this country. And again, these people weren't even committing a violation of American law, because they weren't even in American territorial waters. They were in high seas. But assuming they had been in territorial waters, that's when you grab somebody and then you have the opportunity to interrogate them. By killing them, and especially these two people who were clinging to the side of the boat with no visible indication anyway whatsoever that they were a threat to anybody, they could easily have been taken in captive. And I understand also there were a couple of people who were on another one of these matters that were taken captive, and then they released them back to the country they came from, instead of using them again, taking them into custody and questioning them. The whole thing stinks. And so it's just an outrage, and it, at least, I was sorry to say, forgive me if I lose my train of thought every once in a while, I'm almost 30, is that the other two, I said there were three Republicans, and I just came across these today. The one was the head of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Roger Wicker from Mississippi. The other two were congressmen. Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, right-wing Republican, and the other one was Mike Turner from Ohio, another dyed-in-the-wool, solid Republican, supporter of Trump and almost everything he did. Both of those people expressed great skepticism about this whole drug thing, and that's not all. They also stated that no matter what the justification was, there was no justification under the Code of Armed Services, Code of Military Justice for killing these people who were no visible threat whatsoever to the planes that bombed them or anybody else in the area. So I say this to my Republican friends: if you are kind of a knee-jerk, I'll always vote for Republicans, Democrats are no good, think about this, because you've got these three people who are essentially madder than hell about what Pete Hegseth is doing, and he's the god of war, the god of war, Pete Hegseth, and what he's doing with our military. And I can tell you right now, our military is not happy with this man at all. And they're disgusted, and that's one of the reasons you keep seeing these purges. They fired type generals. They got rid of all their senior JAG officers, the people like in the position of my dad's boss. Just fired them. Why? Because they weren't going along with this illegal conduct. And it's like, you Republicans, you've stood for, among all other things, at least decency and honesty when it comes to the military, and the use of the military, and the misuse of the military. And the other area in which you have stood strong has been in support of Ukraine. And once again, at least two that I saw today. I don't know what Wicker's view on this is, but Bacon and Turner both expressed frustration with the administration for siding with Putin. Siding with Putin. When's the last time Republicans ever sided with the Russians on anything, particularly as it related to a friend of the United States? It hasn't happened in my lifetime since the end of World War II. And here you have suddenly the Trump administration all palsy-walsy with Putin, and all Ukraine wants to do is to be with us, to join the West economically, to join the West militarily, to join the West diplomatically, to be part of our world. Trump wants that is the last thing that Trump wants to tolerate, and that's why he invaded them. And here we have Trump out there saying, well, you're our pal, Igor, whatever the hell his name is, Igor Putin. I know it's not. It's Vlad, which is even worse, but I don't want to insult Dracula. So this is where this present construct of the Republican Party is nothing like the values of the Republican Party my entire long life. I've never seen anything like it, and that was the frustration that I saw from both Bacon and from Turner today. And you can be sure that there's an awful lot of Republicans who are going to start taking issue with Trump more and more. They're going to be Republicans like following the leadership of Marjorie Greene, who I never thought I would see as a potential leader of the Democratic Party. Let's put it that way. So we have a lot more in common, Democrats and Republicans, than you might think initially. I'm talking to my Republican friends now. Please stand up to the people who have taken over the Republican Party, and that includes, frankly, hopefully my potential opponent in my congressional race, who is nothing but a rubber stamp for Trump. Everything he does, this guy steps right up and says, "Oh yeah, he's right. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's good. He's right." No independent thought. No. Let's see where he comes down on these issues that we're discussing today. That'll be a real tell right there. But you Republicans deserve better than to just vote knee-jerk for Republican politicians who take you for granted and are taking this country, frankly, to hell in a handbasket. And I'm not even talking about the tariffs or affordability or all those other things that they're doing wrong. But just on these few things which go to the heart and soul and the value of the Republican Party that I have known my entire life. So with that lecture, whatever you want to call it, me babbling, as my dog says, I'm going to turn you loose, and this is Sunday, and it's the weekend, as all of you know, before my birthday. That's right, the big 3-0 coming at me. So, with that thought, wish me a happy birthday. It's funny, I don't hear anything. Well, maybe I'll hear you tomorrow. But it's not till Tuesday, so if you haven't bought me anything yet, don't panic, there's still time. And this year only, I am accepting late presents. It's good news, huh?